Okay, hi and welcome everyone. I'm Lisa Leitner from A Day in Our Shoes, and I want to thank you all for coming here today and being here to listen and hopefully learn. Um, as you know, I've had this IEP website for almost 10 years, and I've been an IEP advocate for about that same amount of time. And I know we're kind of getting tired of hearing it, but saying, when with the current state of society and with the state of current affairs, we're all becoming more aware of some social issues and social justice issues. So with that in mind, I thought, what do I have to offer? And what I had to offer was just a platform and an audience. And I've been doing a lot of listening and learning for the past couple of weeks, and I know I have a lot more to do. But I can tell you, as someone who felt that her heart was in the right place, I really felt like I was making a difference, and I wasn't. And I needed to do a deeper dive into some important issues. So I asked some of the page followers and Facebook group members if they would be willing to share their experiences. Um, as far as race and disabilities. And that's why we're all here today. This is going to be every Monday at 3 Eastern time. If you are not able to catch it live, yes, it will be on the Facebook page, for all of eternity. I also will be cross-posting to YouTube. I will share it on the blog, and I will always email it out in case you missed it. Once I kind of hand off the mic to the participants to introduce themselves and get started, I'm going to actually kind of disappear, but I will be monitoring the page for your questions and sharing them with the panel. So feel free to ask questions if you'd like. We will answer them as time allows. And that's about it. The only other housekeeping note I think I have is that here on the East Coast, we are having some storms. So people may disappear and come in and out. And if that happens, or if the chat disappears altogether, please just come back to the page and we will try to get it up and running as quickly as we can. So without anything further, I'd like to introduce you to Maria Davis-Pierre. She's a licensed mental health counselor down in Florida, and I'll let her introduce herself, and she's going to be one of your facilitators today.
Hi, everyone. As Lisa said, I am Maria Davis-Pierre, and I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and I am the CEO and founder of Autism in Black, Inc. And with Autism in Black, we support Black parents who have a child diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. We support them through various means of parent education, as well as doing culturally responsive training for organizations. So I am always talking about autism in the Black community and how it impacts parents as well as those who are actually autistic. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation that is also going to be kind of an intro to the rest of the series. So you're going to get a little bit of everything today that is going to introduce you to everything that we will cover in the series. So I'm going to introduce our next panelist, who is Safir.
Hi, thank you so much, Maria. My name is Safir Jenkins. As shown in the bio, yes, I am the Vice President, Chief Public Affairs Officer of Newark Special Education Parent Advisory Council. Also the founder and CEO of Optimum Human Capital Solutions, where we are committed to making cultural change that provides for people-centered solutions. More importantly, though, like many others that are in this broadcast, I am a parent of a group of young Black children who I have many concerns about with regards to the disparities in discipline and certainly access and opportunity in an equitable fashion within education here in New Jersey, as well as is seen across our country. So that is who I am. I will certainly now pass the microphone on to Monique DJ Wilson.
Thank you, Safir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique DJ Wilson. I am a Black woman. I am a Black mother of 3 Black children, 2 daughters, and a Black son. He's a young man that's 33 years old with autism. And I am here. My statement, it's about time. It's never too late. What took you so long? So thank you all for coming out to listen. And I am going to pass this on to Thea.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thea, and my background is chemistry. I'm a realtor, a graduate nurse, a tutor, dancer, drummer. As you can probably get from all those, I do have attention deficit disorder myself, and I have 3 sons. They are 26, 21, and 18. I have firsthand experience with ADHD, OCD, autism, chronic illness, compromised child, auditory processing disorder, dysgraphia. The list goes on and on. And we're glad you're here today because besides dealing with the differences that we may have that don't fit into, let's say, regular education, we also experience some challenges, or I guess I should say additional challenges because of our brown skin. And I will pass this on to Charlene. Unmute your microphone, Cheryl.
Hi, I'm Charlene. I am a parent of 2 daughters, both with IEPs in the school. And I have a light-skinned daughter and a dark-skinned daughter. And I have seen and witnessed the difference of how they are treated in the school system. And I'm just here to help other parents learn how to get your child what you need, because it's what the child needs, not what the adults at the school feel they need, because it's totally different from what the child. Thank you. Anyone else on the panel?
Sharon, if you could go.
Yeah,
Thank
good afternoon. My name is Sharon Scipio. I am a mother of 4 beautiful children. All 4 of them have different learning styles. I started, the first one was homeschooled, and she was homeschooled because it was out of necessity in that we tried the school district, and what we faced was not it wasn't welcoming. She is now moved on, and she is a computer educator, or not educator, but she's in school going for computer technology. My other 3 children at home, we have autism spectrum disorder, we have dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyslexia, ADHD, you name it. As Thea said, we run the gamut. But what we have encountered, my husband and I, is just the disparity in not just what our children are offered, because they're seen as, well, they're not capable of doing what they're capable of doing. It's more so, well, we don't want to stress them out. We don't want to do this, and taking away things from them and not realizing, or lack of caring, the impact of what it will do to the child, not just now, but further on down. So I'm here, like the other group of panelists, is to share what my lived experience has been, not just in a poor district, like in the one we were in initially, but in an affluent district, the one we're in now, that it doesn't matter where you are. We are first seen as being Black first, Black and autistic, Black with ADHD. And that Blackness is what bars us from so much that is out there. So I'm here to lend my voice for those who aren't able to speak or aren't able to be here, to say, as Monique said, what took you so long, and enough is enough.
Jess.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Jess Sierra Silva. I'm actually currently in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I am the parent of 2 young extra needs children, and the ages are 4 to 10. And therefore, they're across the early intervention program as well as the elementary school program. My experiences are within brick and mortar school district, online virtual charter school systems, and on the ground charter schools. And my educational background is I'm a neuroscience degree major. And I've worked very closely with a number of different specialties as a result of my degree, along with my own experience with my children. So I come here looking to support the Black community, but also as a representative, as a woman who is a person of color, who has family members for whom, as a young, I would say, adolescent, I had to support with special needs because I saw the disparity. And so I continue to know that my role and responsibility as a person of color is different than a person of the Black race. And so I want to uphold that and respect that, but also recognize that there's disparity, and that disparity does come from the spectrum of color, and that needs to be again held to. We need to be held accountable for that, and recognize that and own that, so we can change that. So thank you so much for having me.
Sabra.
Hi, my name is Sabra Townsend. First and foremost, I am Brandon's mom. He's 22. I've gotten him through the school district of Philadelphia. So now we're in the adult world of different issues. Brandon was born with a very rare physical condition, and just for kicks and grins, diagnosed with autism at a little shy of 2 years old. I am an advisor to a Philadelphia organization called Autism Sharing and Parenting, and I'm currently the director of operations for the Jefferson Center for Autism and Neurodiversity. But I say all that as a mom. I'm here as a mom. And the things that I've seen in my professional career have shown me that there are times when it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter what your experience level is, people make assumptions when they see you. And from that point, I think I'm here to share some of the experiences and some of the challenges, and hopefully some actions and suggested solutions, at least in the moment, in the day, what may be able to be improved. And it will, the things that I look forward to are going to take many, many more people than are on this panel or participating or seeing this workshop. I would like to say thank you to Lisa Leitner for providing this platform for today. I think this is an excellent opportunity, and I look forward to not only the rest of this session, but the remaining sessions on Mondays.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. So as we know, well, as we as panelists know, it is very different parenting a child who is Black and then with a disability, because our children are seen as Black before anything else. And what we want to talk about is our experiences raising our children who are Black and then autistic, Black and then having ADHD, Black and then with, any other disability. The reason that I, started Autism in Black was because as a parent, when I was getting my daughter diagnosed, and I am, like I said, a licensed mental health counselor, my husband is actually a physician. When we were getting our daughter diagnosed, we had to go through so many things to actually get this diagnosis. And when you're talking about two healthcare professionals who know the world of what we're navigating in healthcare field, as well as having resources and still having to go through 3, 4 other healthcare professionals to get them to listen to us. We were being seen as Black before anything else, Black before being a professional who knew what we were talking about. And having these resources with us, we were wondering, how do those who don't have resources navigate this? It is a difficult time trying to get our children diagnosed because we have to go through so many things. When we're looking at stats, the CDC just released this year that autism is prevalent across all races the same. and it's 2020, and we're just getting that statistic. And we all know that, of course, but it has to be said for hopefully healthcare professionals to listen to us when we're coming in there to talk and say our children are exhibiting characteristics of such and such and such. So these are the things that we have to navigate. It's not about equality, it's about justice, because we have to go through so many dips and valleys just to get the resources that other communities, mostly white communities, get. We get so much misinformation to our communities about what diagnoses are, about what the resources are, that we're constantly trying to play catch up. There is a gap in diagnosis. There's a gap in us receiving resources. So we each want to talk a little bit about that today. So let's talk about, one, parenting a Black autistic child and what that is like. So I'm going to let Sharon talk a little bit about that first.
Well, I will tell you, we got our diagnosis late, very late in the game. We didn't get our diagnosis until he was in 6th grade, going into 7th grade. All the time, all along, we were in a private school, and they were saying, oh, they talked us into holding him back in kindergarten. He was held back because he wasn't saying his alphabets. He wasn't speaking to the other children. All the signs were there, and we were exposed to speech therapy. Speech therapy was the first thing we got in the school. And as time progressed, I realized there's something not right. He was speaking like a robot. He was, his sentences, his sentence structure, just everything he was doing, it just was not there. So by the time we got the diagnosis, so all this early intervention was completely out of the window for him. So we have now a young man that's dealing with this diagnosis. Well, where do we go? We didn't know where to go. We weren't offered anything. We were lost. And to deal with the school, we were in Trenton School District at the time. It was awful. It was awful. There wasn't, the support was not there. Although he was not restricted, it was like he wasn't expected to do much. I had a teacher, his science teacher, because they had him in in-class resource pullout. And there was a problem with the report he had to do over the Thanksgiving break. And then we had our parent-teacher conference. Parent-teacher conference, he had a very low grade on that. And I'm talking to the teacher. And she was, well, he didn't turn in the work, so I just graded him on what he did in the classroom, what I saw he did. I said, but you gave us the extra time for him to complete the work over the holidays. He's completed it, he's emailed it to you, and you still don't grade it. And she leaned into me and whispered, well, you know he has the diagnosis, right? And I was in awe. I was dumbfounded. I was aghast. I was like, excuse me? So you don't expect him to learn. So you expect him to just show up in your class and, oh, we're just gonna pass him along. That's not what we expect for our children. We expect for our children, and we're demanding that our children are educated. We are demanding that they get the resources and the skills and the different things that they need. He wants to go on to college. How are you preparing him by just, oh, we're just gonna let him go along because he has a diagnosis? Unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And it hasn't gotten any better. What our son has is because of what we've been doing, what we've been looking at, reaching out and going to ourselves. Getting the information has been like pulling teeth. Monique has been a resource in that we reached out to Monique and she was like, no, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. But there's nothing. The school system was not providing what it was our son needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Saphir, would you like to share your experience?
Sure. So I have a young Black son. He's 6, and he has been diagnosed with autism. And one of the things that I found to be a very common occurrence is the response to certain behaviors that for him are normal and for many others like him, even without a disability. The response to the high energy levels, the response to independence is viewed as behavioral problems and is responded to with discipline as opposed to liberation. And so, you know, in many ways, they tie it to his disability when in my expertise as his dad, I can clearly see that it's completely unrelated. And so rather than being encouraged or rewarded for positive behavior through supports, instead he's responded to as a problem child or a disruptor of order. When in fact, I've sat in classrooms with him and have seen similar behaviors demonstrated by students who were not Black, and I've seen the response be completely different. And I think that's one of the things that really requires attention and some serious focus across the country, and that is the inherent response, the inherent stigma that exists with Black youth and for adults who view their behaviors as negative without ever attempting to understand them.
Thank you. Monique.
Okay. As I mentioned, I probably have the oldest Black man here on the panel. My son is 33. He will be 34, July 15th. And I'm going to touch on a couple of things that actually will probably be further conversations through our various topics, you know, within the next upcoming Mondays. First and foremost, all of this conversation starts about being Black. And it started for me from the time I was pregnant, and this was my third child. And as a family, we did not have health insurance at this time like I had for my other two children, and utilized a clinic where you're seen as a Black, pregnant, of course, pregnant woman in the clinic. I never had any issues with any pregnancy issues with my other children. During my 8th month, I stopped feeling my son move. I went to the emergency room and I was told, we'll observe you. Well, now after looking into this over years, I realized that they observed for many hours where they saw my son had had a bowel movement in utero, that he still was not moving, yet they continued to observe. When they finally decided to break my water, his heart rate immediately went to down. I was given an emergency C-section. By the time my son was delivered, his APGAR score was 0, 0, 0. He was dead. A very ambitious young man who was just starting his career decided to resuscitate. He worked on my son for over 20 minutes and they brought him back. Unknown to me at that time, who is now my ex-husband, was given while I'm unconscious the choice very quickly, even though they just want to see where your head is. Should we keep him hooked up to oxygen or give him a choice? He didn't know what to do. My son is here today. He was in the NICU for 2 months. His second day of life, he immediately started seizing. He now is a young man who lives with microcephaly, a seizure disorder, ADHD, ADD. He's bipolar. Autism was the very last diagnosis we were given. He's nonverbal, he is incontinent. And I say all of these things to say that this young man lives a very engaging and quality of life in his own home in Howell, New Jersey, with 24-hour supports, with the expectation of a good life and what that means to who he is. But I'm saying all this to say, but to get there, I felt like, just like the women that I see here, 33 years ago, I saw no one that looked like me. I saw no one that supported or gave advice as to what way to go. So I realized after stopping work, I didn't work for 12 years. I cleaned houses to learn how to be that expert I needed to be. Because I saw no one that looked like me. I saw no one making the decisions for parents that looked like me. I saw white women who stayed at home, who made it their obligation to volunteer and to ensure that all of the services and supports they needed, whether they could afford it or not, were afforded to them. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but again, this is my perception, my experience. And I knew then I needed to be a voice, not only for myself, but for others. And I did find other Black women who helped support what I needed to know. But the disparities around being Black with autism, or Black and autistic, or any type of disability starts from the womb. It starts around the conversation of being Black and the disparities in healthcare. It starts with the conversation of being Black and the socioeconomic inopportunities that occur. It starts from being Black and the conversations of equality and equity that don't ever spill over. So we are here today hoping that you are listening and that you take away some of our experiences that we may share in bits and pieces, and to just acknowledge it, even just listening and making a slight change. And big up to Lisa Leitner, because she did acknowledge through all of her advocacy what she did not see. And so, that's what I'm sharing right now. We have an amazing amount of weeks with a lot of topics. We hope that you all come back so that we can really dig a little deeper into all of our experiences of being Black and having children with autism.
Thank you, Monique. So we do have a question. The question is, has anyone been mentally exhausted? And most definitely. I think it is mentally exhausting trying to navigate these systems when we're dealing with stigmas within our own community and stigmas with outside of our community. It is seeming as if, once we peel back one layer of the onion, here goes another one, and it surely makes you cry. So yes, we do get mentally exhausted, but what you have to understand with being Black is that society doesn't allow us room to be mentally exhausted. So we still have to push through it and still fight for these resources for our children. We're not allowed to be passionate about anything because we will be labeled as aggressive and angry, loud Black woman. When
we're always the angry Black women. We're
exactly.
we're never forward thinkers. We're angry. We're angry
yes.
Black women seeking information that others seek all of the time.
Exactly.
And for being at that table.
Exactly. So I will be seen as, someone who is, oh, here comes that problem parent. What is she going to do today? Oh my gosh. When I'm just really trying to get resources for my kid, we all at a certain level are fighting for our children to have, services. But when you add in the Black factor, that means we have to fight 10, 20 times harder because of how we're seeing those stigmas again, which we're going to start talking about, stigmas within and outside of our communities that we have to fight. When healthcare professionals do not believe Black children can be autistic, that leads our children to be misdiagnosed. When healthcare professionals don't want to have conversations with Black moms because they believe that we are loud and aggressive and they don't even want to start the conversation, that leads to our children getting diagnosed at a later time. When they think that Black fathers are not involved and we have no, our children have no fathers, you know, that is something that also impacts us. When you have police officers in the school to protect the school, that impacts our children when we know for sure how police officers treat us as Black people. You know, so we have all these stigmas that we are trying to navigate, you know, that hinder us from being on the same playing field as white children, you know. So I'm going to let Saber talk about some of these stigmas that, you know, she may have experienced, as well as being mentally exhausted and how to deal with that.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. One, there's a belief that I have, and I've actually said this in meetings, not necessarily just internally. And I often summon a smile on my face, or as Maya Angelou says, just, you know, opening and showing your teeth. It may or may not be a real smile, but so as not to be perceived as that angry Black woman. But what I've said, and I truly believe this, is that I never, and I mean never, fault anyone for doing whatever they have to do to get the services for their child. Doesn't matter, young, old, rich, poor, Black, white, Hispanic, Native American, doesn't matter. Whatever you do and whatever strings you've pulled or people you've known or money you've paid to get services. Just don't tell me I'm crazy when I ask for the same thing. And so I often will observe, and I've been in, I guess, blessed because I'm in the field because of my son's challenges. And I've seen services be provided with minimal, I won't say no challenge, but minimal challenges. And in my assessment, I thought, and not just to say, oh, well, I want that too. No, my son needed that too. And when I asked for that, whatever that is, there seemed to be some barriers. And I would say, well, okay. And I may or may not name names depending on the situation, but I could, having listened and taken notes, that such and such was provided in such and such situation. What is different about the needs of my son such that he can't receive those things? So and if there's not been someone to set that precedent, then I'll just do the battle without that piece. But more often than not, there are services that your child or young adult or adult needs that other people receive. And if you, spread yourself out in different places, now that's not always easy, but if you listen, you can find where services are provided and then seek them in ways that are helpful to you. The other thing that I've often said, I have a house, a kid, a car, and a job. Like I believe it was Monique, that I'm now divorced. I didn't plan on being divorced in this process, but as a single parent, there are all kinds of assumptions that are made. Often they are not positive assumptions. And so I've had to battle that piece. And then in terms of being tired, and God rest her soul, both of my parents were very supportive of me and my family growing up. But one thing my mother used to say was, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So what I have learned to do is to take care of myself, even if that's just, getting a pedicure or, getting my hair done or some, having this is going to sound like a really small thing. And I'm not plugging any particular brand of coffee, but if I go into a coffee shop, and pre-COVID, obviously, if I go into a coffee shop, I actually want my coffee in a ceramic mug. I don't want a throwaway cup. I want a ceramic mug. And that's my little treat. If I'm going to pay too much money for a cup of coffee, I want it in a ceramic mug. Those little things, flowers, a pretty blouse, You know, not a whole lot of money, but something that makes me feel good. Because if I don't take care of myself, I will be exhausted, not pleasant to be around. And that's not good for me. And it's not good for my young adult. It's not good for anybody, because you don't want me on the day where I have not had a good breakfast in an IEP meeting or in an ISP meeting. So the struggle around being tired all the time, and don't get me wrong, I agree with Maria in that there is a stereotype of this strong, loud, angry Black woman. I reserve her. I have her. I can be her. I can be her. I can. But I reserve her for situations where she needs to be seen. So maybe that I won't speak for anyone else, but if in fact, for me, if I get really, really, really quiet, there's really a problem. So I've learned through the years to take care of myself, my stay in my character and who I am. And I generally tend to be a positive person. But if I don't take care of that, then I'm not in a place to be helpful to my son. And let me just back up one thing I want to say before I forget it. When we were talking, someone was, I think it was Monique, was talking about how people didn't assume that your son could do things. And I think it was Sharon also mentioned that. One of my life tenets is to presume competence. People have to presume competence no matter what, whether it's a person with 15 different disabilities or someone you just met. As we work to present this webinar, I presumed competence about everybody here, otherwise we wouldn't be here, that we'll figure it out. And so I expect of anyone who's in my young man's life, if I don't see them presuming competence and actions speak louder than words, then we're having a conversation, you get one chance. And if I see you not presuming that he can handle what it is that he's trying to do, then we're having a different conversation about what services are being provided to him. So standing on presuming competence and taking care of myself as a caregiver and provider is what helps me not be exhausted all the time.
Thank you. So we're having a lot of questions come in. Before we move on to the questions about police officers, I do want Thea to talk about the experience of being a Black mother and how that is different from a white mother, and what we have to deal with that is different. And then we're going to move on to talking about officers.
Okay, thanks, Maria. For me, the community that I live in is predominantly white. So many times in our classroom, my sons were the only brown child there. I say brown because my son with autism, when he was in elementary school, that's how he referred to himself. He knew everybody said Black, but he always said brown, you know, the literalist of autism. One story that sticks out to me is he was just in preschool, okay? Two of them were in preschool, actually, the same preschool. And I remember the teachers would always say to me, oh, they're so articulate. What do you say to them? And I was a bit taken aback because I'm like, they're just my kids. I just talk to them like regular. But a number of teachers said it. I wondered about it. I mean, I didn't know if they were saying, well, they're articulate for being Black. I mean, you know, I don't know if that was like the rest of it that they meant, but I wasn't sure what that meant. And I didn't know how people are different. I mean, I talk to my kids in a normal way. So that's one thing that just seemed a little odd. I wondered, do they say that to other parents, or, you know, what's going on with that? And it wasn't until my son, 4 years old, diagnosed with attention deficit at the time, not autism or anything. And he was having a birthday. And I said, hey, let's invite your friends. I don't have any friends. So he would keep coming home saying he doesn't have any friends. And I didn't understand why he was saying that. So I went to the school and I asked a couple of teachers, and, you know, they they didn't have much to say, but on one occasion, and I'm pretty sure this teacher got in trouble for this, she said, oh yeah, they steal his shoes, they chase him. So basically they were admitting that all of this bullying was going on. Now, he's the only brown child there, okay? And so of course, I'm wondering, well, is it because, you know, like what's going on here? So I addressed it with the school. They said, oh, you know, we're so sorry, we're going to address it with the kids. And I said, well, you need to talk to their parents. I demanded, so here we go with the angry Black woman, because now you're upset because your kid's been bullied at school. You feel guilty because he was telling you, he told you he didn't have any friends. Like, you know, why didn't I ask more questions? So then I find out this is happening. I am angry. I mean, I think any of us would be, knowing that our child is being bullied, the teachers know, and nobody's doing anything about it. So then I said, well, you need to talk to their parents. You know, I mean, I demanded they speak to the parents, and they agreed they would speak to the parents. So then the weekend goes by, Monday they come, they said, well, we decided we're not going to talk to the parents. And I was like, well, you know what? If you don't talk to the parents, I'll talk to the parents. I will let them know what their kids are doing. Because if my son was treating somebody like that, I would want to know. This needs to be nipped in the bud. So I did talk to a couple of parents, and then I found out that the administration of the daycare was going around asking the teachers about me, like how nice I was or if I was mean. I mean, I guess I was like almost to the list of getting kicked out because I was demanding that they handle this injustice. And the only thing I can say is that, you know, everybody loved me there, you know, and you know, sometimes your kindness and all that, I mean, Saber was saying it, you know, like you reserve those times. And yes, I was angry, I was upset, I did feel like it was because my son was brown. People could argue different things, but you know, when you're the only one and then this is allowed to happen, because I felt like if my son was not brown or white, that they wouldn't have allowed other kids to do that to him. And as we all know, trauma and bullying and stuff like that in young kids affects them for the rest of their life. You know, so I guess what I want to say for parents who are listening, who maybe are, you know, are of the majority or white, like talk to your kids, you know, talk to them about the importance of, you know, not treating someone differently because of their race. In this case, I have to say, I mean, the school really disappointed me and I was ready to leave, but I felt like I made my point when I said, I'm going to tell the other parents. And then I almost dared them to like try to kick me out. They didn't, but it was very uncomfortable at that point.
Thank you, Thea. I want Safir to talk next, one about his experience being a Black father, as he's the only male on the panel, and also to begin the conversation around SROs and police officers in the school system.
Thank you, Maria. So in response to what Sabra mentioned earlier, I think it's definitely a novel idea to maintain a presumption of competence, or even, for that matter, a presumption of innocence for young Black students. And in both those cases, most often, in my experience, it simply does not exist. Instead, there's a presumption of guilt, a presumption of incompetence, a presumption of brokenness in the home, and many other things that impact the perceived behaviors of young Black children. As a dad, when I go into my son's school, or any of my children's school for that matter, there's always a shock and awe that I'm even around, that I exist and that I'm involved. That for me is terrible. It's a terrible disposition to have for any parent, male or female, father or mother, to suggest that somehow they are outside of the norm, that they are exceptional because they're there. In reality, you know, what I've come to learn is that there are oftentimes a lot of advice that's given to Black parents, to me in particular, from non-Black parents or parents of students who are not Black, about how to overcome some of the challenges we're talking about. A lot of them say things like, oh, join your parent group, or get involved in your child's school, or call repeatedly and write to your child's teacher or guidance counselor or principal. While all these things are novel ideas, what it lacks is understanding. And the reason that it lacks understanding is because we've got to get real about the fact that many of the disparities that our children face today are the result of laws that existed many years ago. Some still exist today, but the destructive outcomes of those laws have yet to be repaired. Redlining is one of them. When your school system is funded by property tax, and largely in part, many Black students across the nation, especially in urban areas, live in a space where home ownership is limited, they're already at a disadvantage because resources are few. And in response to the limitation of those resources, many parents of Black children have to work, sometimes multiple jobs, just to make ends meet. So then they're further burdened because they are not even able to be actively engaged as a parent in their child's education. There's a couple of stats that I want to share, and of course I want to be mindful about not turning this into a lesson, but it's important that we look at the evidence that exists so that people who are watching and listening, who are willing to learn from our experiences, understand that this is not made up. As of 2015, the National Council on Disability reported that 85% of youth behind bars have a disability, and that's regardless of their race. But when you couple that with the fact that African-American students are 3 times as likely as their white peers to be identified as having a disability, that means they're also that much more likely to be imprisoned or incarcerated, if not more. There's another statistic that I want to show, and that is, according to the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and this is only in New Jersey, but the reason I think it's important is because there's this notion that racism is relegated to the South of the United States. Structural racism is relegated to those states where slavery was legal the longest. Well, in reality, that's not the case. Segregation in New Jersey is still one of the worst in the country when we talk about school attendance and where students are enrolled. 21-to-1 is the ratio of Black to white youth incarceration in New Jersey. That is the highest disparity in the entire country. So when we talk about the advice that we're receiving to just pull up our bootstraps or grab our britches and pull them up and just face these challenges head on, we have to look at the facts. The facts are that systems at one point were legally structured against us, and the repairs for all of the damage that has been done has not been accomplished, it has not been achieved, and it hasn't even been acknowledged as a need that exists for our young people today. So when we talk about things like the struggles our children face, or you hear the term reparations, it's more than people being interested in getting a check. It's about righting the wrongs that have created the disparities that exist today, where even if we are 10 times as good as our peers who are not Black, we still face the obstruction of justice, equality, liberation, and everything else that mirrors it.
Thank you, Safir. And what I think we also have to think about when we're talking about these stigmas is that why it's so impactful to the Black community, you know, because when we're talking about you're in it for a check, angry and loud, you know, lack intelligence, your father's not involved, you know, these stigmas are more perceived towards the Black community. You know, when we're looking at white communities, the same thing happens. When we're looking at Asian communities, the same thing happens there. But when we're talking about these negative stereotypes, it's always projected upon us as the Black community. And that's why it's so harmful when it's coming directly towards us. It's if we're the only ones in the world who have to deal with these things. So we're talking about those biases that are automatically placed upon us before someone even says hi, bye, thank you to us. So these are things that we have to deal with, just trying to navigate things. When we're looking at how our children may perceive, especially now heading back into schools, police officers and SROs, there's going to be some PTSD that is attached with that. Because our children see what's happening today and they see how our officers treat them, our children perceive police officers in a different way. When something happens to me, and I was having this conversation with my mother, I would be hesitant to call the police, especially if it was against a white person, because I don't know how they're going to perceive it first. The same with our children. They're not going to readily go to police officers when we've seen, for some of you who just understand that in 2020 this is happening. But when you're seeing that our children are, how they have the interactions with the officers at the school, it's because not that they're guilty, not that they're being suspicious, but because they may be dealing with anxiety when dealing with the officer and any other thing that may be coming to their mind. But of course, when it comes to our children, they're perceived automatically, as Sophia was saying, guilty. So we have to think about that when we're navigating and inviting, officers to be protective of the school system, but they're not really protecting us. This is why training is important. This is why culturally responsive training is important. This is why having training on the intersection of race and disability is important, because one, our children also present differently than what is in the DSM, which is also very whitewashed. So this is what we're talking about when we have to deal with getting past certain barriers just to have some equal footing. So I know Monique wants to say something next, so I'm going to let her talk.
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what you're saying in regards to the police and SROs. A lot of the times when we attend conferences or learning about what are some strategies that we need to do in regards to the community, knowing our sons and daughters, one of the typical strategies is introduce them to the police. Let the police know who you are. And with some of us, there's that hesitant. I have been and have heard other parents talking about the success of the police understanding their children flapping their arms. And I start thinking of Eleanor Bumpers, or I start thinking of my son, who at 33 weighs over 200 pounds, and likes to hug, and him running towards someone or a police officer and it being mistaken. We've seen it happen. He doesn't have a taser in his hand. He doesn't have a cell phone, but it can be misconstrued and he can be shot. He can be taken down and choked. These are the things that we think about when talking about introducing our sons and daughters to the police. These are the things I think about when you might think, the things that our children do independently. We worry about driving while Black. We worry about, I've had instances, my son has what has been called challenging behaviors. I've had to pull over on the side of the road. My son is as big as me. I don't like things being misconstrued that we're a male and female having a domestic confrontation. So driving while Black, running while Black, being Black is always first. And a lot of the things that we are talking about here happens just by being Black. And then on top of being Black and autistic.
Exactly. Especially when knowing that characteristics of autism, our children having these interactions with police officer. My daughter may not readily respond, right after you asking her name. She may need time to process. She may start stimming. She may, she has selective mutism, so she may go mute because of her anxiety and being in that situation where she doesn't know quite exactly what to do. But because autism is a diagnosis that, you can't see, they're automatically going to see what first. Of course, she's a Black young girl. And what is she being suspicious about? What is she not telling us? Is she trying to lie? So these are things that our children, have to face. And as parents, we have to, every time we send our child out the door, we're thinking, we hope they come back. So these are things that we have to deal with because our worries are different. And I know Cheryl Lynn has 2 daughters, as she was saying, and how she's had to deal with the colorism issue regarding her daughter. So I want her to talk about that and what she's experienced.
Hi, thank you. I can remember as far back, well, now she's a senior, but when my daughter was in 2nd grade and she weighed maybe 40 pounds because of other medications she was on, and she has sensitive issues. So one day she bought a teaspoon to eat her applesauce snack at school. Well, that was considered a weapon. Security of the school came, they emptied out the classroom. She was left in the room. Somebody came and got her. They took her to the office. They called me, and it was a whole thing about a teaspoon. I was like, really? Did you really think she's gonna do like a Shawshank Redemption here? A 2nd grader? She's taking a teaspoon because she doesn't like plastic spoons to eat. But those are one of so many that I've seen them do to her through the years. And it's really disheartening. It's really disheartening because she had to learn quick. She had to see racism at such a young age. I'm an older mom. I grew up before we had any services for special needs in schools. I remember clearly that was the classroom that no one went to, only those kids that jumped around. That's what it was. And I grew up in the South Bronx. So if you were Latina, you were even further behind because, like they say, Spanish, they say we're the last on the list because we don't speak English. And I remember even with her writing, they wouldn't give her OT because it was okay for her to put an X for her signature. And I'm like, how can that be? My parents came from Puerto Rico. They speak and write English and Spanish. My daughter, who's a millennial, why is she putting an X? It's kind of like they want to dumb them down. Like, this is all you can do and be happy. At least it's an X. No, that's not acceptable to me. There's no reason why a child born in 2000, should be putting an X, especially born in the US, as a signature. So, and I know it'll continue, but I will also continue because I'm gonna fight for them. I have to. Because if they don't do, like I told them once at school, if you can't provide my daughter what she needs now to be a productive citizen when she finishes school, you either pay now or you pay later when she's sitting at home in the system. So it's your choice, pay now or pay later. But either way, you're gonna have to pay because you'll be paying with your tax dollars to house her and feed her because she cannot get a job. She cannot read. She can't even sign on a dotted line. That's been my experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherilyn. Jess, can you talk to us about your experiences?
Sure, certainly. I firstly just want to say thank you to everybody who's spoken before me, just because I think it's given me a lot of opportunity to sort of think through some of the things that you've been through, and reiterate that these are not isolated instances. In fact, like in some ways, this is a little bit triggering for me. It's so many things that I've been through in my own way. Um, I have a 10-year-old with autism, and the spectrum of experiences that we've had from being diagnosed, after diagnosis, in school, um, punishments over rewards, direct conversations about creating positivity and creating environment that specifically they generalizes for the entire school's incentive programs and positive behavior programs that just don't seem to be applying for my child. And by that I mean, you're suggesting that we're doing our absolute best to treat your child, my brown child, with the attitude that we're going to give them skills by rewarding them for doing those skills. And really, they're not. They continually punish them for things that they like to separate from autism. They like to suddenly categorize them as delinquent or misbehaved. My personal experience was, or has continued to be, one where my partner and I are well educated, and I personally have a very informed, I would say, awareness of autism and therapies. And so I've always come to the table with the special education department at my son's school, with a gambit of either support services like BCBAs so that we can address issues with the school, only for them to give you excuse after excuse after excuse for why they could not address things in a timely fashion, or they were things that we can sit and wait about things, all that Lisa has described to you. But for us, it was compounded with something additional, and it was these cultural stigmas that what I was asking for was more than I should be asking for, that I was doing it in a way that was in some way vitriolic, and that I was being too aggressive, when I knew that these were, again, basic responsibilities the schools had, like when to address an IEP, and how long you had to take on those particular tasks from the school. And if I went to remind them and ask them, I was mistreated or ignored. And specifically, unfortunately, for my child, I felt strongly that they were insisting on this. These are his autism diagnosis is one thing, but his behaviors are just terrible and maligned. And they were trying to go from the direction of oppositional behaviors, from trying to get him in a behavioral support class. And let's talk about resources. We were lucky to have amazing insurance, employer-based insurance, that paid for a neuropsych evaluation that reinforced every single component of the things I had been describing, which was my child was not receiving the type of incentives they should have been receiving, and that my child in no way had any oppositional defiance. In fact, my child had developed serious anxiety due to the problematic approach that the adults in the school took. And we were addressing that anxiety with medication. But that anxiety wasn't an anxiety that developed out of innate biological issues. It came from an environmental influence where he was being approached so negatively constantly, over and over and over and over, never rewarded for his good behavior, constantly punished for his negative behavior, and then told that has nothing to do with your diagnosis. It has everything to do with you choosing to do that. The neuropsych evaluation came in, refuted absolutely every single point. was clear that they weren't doing enough for him. And they demonstrated that, the school demonstrated to me in an evaluation that my son was demonstrating almost paranoia about influences outside and people trying to target him. The director of the school, as you know, when you start to have meeting after meeting and the school administrators start adding up and the tiers go higher and higher, and suddenly you're talking to the head of the special education for the entire district suddenly, because you're too angry and you're asking for too much. Well, they're sitting there and I had to explain. Interestingly enough, my child is not paranoid about being targeted. In fact, we had to deal with police officers because my child was attacked by 3 schoolmates, called the N-word, punched in the face, kicked in the face. He's 10 years old. I asked the director, do you think that that's paranoia? The director said, I had no idea that that had happened. And I said, well, how are you trying to come and pull him into a behavioral support class based off of behaviors that he's having because he's struggling so much due to the racial culture of the school, with kids telling things like build the wall to my brown child who couldn't understand what it's about. He had to come and ask me every day. So I had to keep explaining these issues to him. And suddenly he's paranoid and needs to be put in an isolated class for 80% of the day. And these are the types of things that are compounded. Again, race is compounded on top of what's already a difficult situation. And so now you're struggling to parse through them for people. And I was going to really say this resonated the most to me. The system in school is very much set up like the system for our criminal justice system, where our children are often gaslit for things that happen. So they become defensive and they become traumatized. And we develop, as a culture, a desire to protect ourselves. And that itself has become gaslit. So it's not just about what's going on outside of the school. It's also what's being conditioned inside of the school. Because my child does not want to spend time around any authority member, no teacher, no principal. We're going through a lot of steps of therapy. We're going through trauma-informed care with professionals and adults. And I'm making sure that there are people of color included, people who know what it's like to be informed about how to deal with them. And it's looking way better. It really is looking way better for him, but it's meant isolation for us. And that's not the answer. The answer is, if that school that we went to was accountable and spoke to the children's parents, and it would have been that those state police that instead said that, well, these children probably learned the N-word from TV. Our world is like that. Racially stuff happens all the time. It's just kids being kids. It's a collective desire to end that complacency, with racism, because it shouldn't be that the 1 or 2 children who really need to be protected and supported are now out of the school because they don't have any place for them there. Because your children, if you have white children, will learn nothing about inclusivity if every single child in that classroom looks exactly like them. And it's not going to be easy as an adult trying to change those feelings. So I apologize if I went on really long, but I really appreciate everything everyone said, because it's just so much so my experience too. And we have been lucky in many ways, because I can leverage the fact that the color spectrum is for me on the lighter side, that I speak English and I speak it well. Those are things that I can leverage, but I am now using them to support people who need a voice. And that's what should happen every single time. Thank you, guys.
That I almost had a hallelujah moment there. Jess was very eloquently put into words what, you know, we as panelists are feeling. And I'm seeing a lot of comments on what should we do next? How should we be good allies? And I think it's best to focus our, you know, last 20 to 30 minutes on that, how you should be good allies, and also knowing that the experiences that we experience as Black people are different.
Maria, can I set the stage for that, please?
Go ahead.
Because when I talk about presuming competence, I do that for myself as well. And so I learned it the hard way, but after a not so good experience with my son in kindergarten, and as I said, he's 22, by first grade, I thought, you know what? I'm going to meet the teachers, the principals, the office staff, the counselors, either on the first day of school or those couple of days before, often when they go in to set up the rooms and stuff. And I'm going to bring the cookies or the cupcakes or the chocolate then, when everything's new, before anything happens, so that they know my name, I know their name. And at the time, you know, I was not divorced. My husband was there with me. And Safir, oh, how I understand your comment when a Black man shows up. They were shocked. So that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, I start with, let's have the conversations now when everything is going well, so that you know that you will see me. And I had a full-time job. So yes, I took the hit of taking a day off to do that. That's where I start. And even now, as my son is an adult, we have the conversation. He's not, I don't describe him as nonverbal, but he's not your conversational kid. So I have the conversation. I always ask his permission, but you know, I get phone numbers. He has a physical condition. I've had home health aides and all that. I understand their rules, but if you get to know where I live and you have my phone number, I get to know where you live and I have your phone number. So we set the stage with competency at the beginning. In other words, I set my expectations up here for myself as well. I don't ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do in terms of emailing and text messaging and all of that. I'm not going to say it's you know, solved all the problems, but it has been a way for expectations to be set. And that's where I start in terms of actions. And there are other suggestions I may have. I have a website I'm developing, and I'll let you all know. It's called Everyday Strategies, about some of these action steps. But initially, I set that bar very high in terms of presuming competence.
Thank you, Sabra. So yeah, we want to get into the action steps on how you all can be good allies. As I was saying, we want to make sure that you're understanding that our experiences as Black individuals are different. So while you may have experienced something similar, know that our experience required a lot of maneuvering and navigating around systems that are in place to keep us held back. So when we're talking about action steps, the first thing is listening to Black voices and what they're telling you. If we're telling you that we're experiencing something because we are Black, listen to us, especially if you are not Black, because you don't know what it's like to be Black. So we want to make sure that we're listening to the voices. We're not asking for white saviors to come and save us. We're asking that you use your white privilege to help get these systems out of place that are keeping us held back. You know, so when we are talking about action steps, we want to foremost begin there, beginning with you listening to us, beginning with you using your white privilege to help, you know, remove these systems in place. And I know Sharon has a lot of actionable steps that she talks about as well. So I want her to talk about that.
Yes. So I kind of echo what Maria said, is listening to us. We know our children. We're passionate about our children. We're passionate about our children's education. So we understand. I shouldn't have to go get some expert to tell you what I know, what I'm raising. Looking at, as a nurse in the healthcare profession, I am compelled to do continuing education every year. You need to ensure, if you're serving this population, that you have continuing education that is current, up to date, and evidence-based. Because I'm tired of going in, looking at individuals. Well, what do you want? Oh, I don't know. Well, I have to check with my supervisor. Why don't you know? Why are we checking with the supervisor? If Timmy's mom can come in and request such and such and such and gets it, why am I looking like I have 5 different heads, or I have a snake on my back and you don't understand what I'm saying? So our biggest thing is listen to us. We understand our children. We want to work with you. We will be there whenever you call. We're not going to not answer your phone call. We're going to show up. So we're just asking that instead of being a part of the blocks that's already set up in the system, because the system is working the way the system was intended to be. What we're asking is for you not to be in support of that. We're asking for you to step out of the way. If you're not going to be a supporter, if you're not going to be an ally, then step out of the way so we can do what we need to do. Listen to us. Look at the recent research that's out there. Understand that our children has the same struggles that you do. But on top of that, the psychological trauma that they see on a daily basis. It's a daily basis that our children are exposed to these things, the way the teacher speaks to the child. If you hear that, believe the child. Why is it that the child is lying and you don't want to support that child? So now the child can't come to you because they know you don't believe them. So the biggest thing is hearing our voices and actually seeing us for who we are, concerned, and many of us are educated parents. And we do have husbands that are also in the picture who also care about your children, but they're out there working those 5 jobs, right? It's not that they don't want to be there, or they're out there working that job like Maria's husband in a hospital, and the hours that he has to work normally aren't 8 hours. He's in there for an extended period of time. So respect the fact that we're doing the same thing. And we just need you to either meet us or step aside.
So true, Sharon. And I think it's also important to know that in being a good ally means doing the work within yourself first. And that work is hard and it is difficult. And you're going to be dealing with challenging things that you have learned your whole life that are what but in doing that work, what it sets you up to do is to be more open to the experiences of others. So know that you have to first do the work. If you see somebody that is, being racist, call them out and hold them accountable to it. Do not turn a blind eye to it, especially in these systems of school, community, police officers. When you're seeing that, call them out on it, hold them accountable to it. Help us to get the schools to get the trainings that they need. They need to decolonize their curriculum. We need to see our children more in the curriculum. My Black children need to see more than just slaves in the curriculum, so we need to make sure that we are holding these schools accountable, holding the community accountable, holding the police officers accountable. We're not talking about cultural competence here, because that's not real. I'm a Black woman and I'll never be competent in Black people. What you want to do is be culturally responsive. What we want is trainings that are in depth, that cover culture and how you should respond and how things are different for us. You know, we want you to get trainings on, you know, disabilities as police officers, so that one, you have had the culturally responsive training, two, you've interacted with those who have disabilities. So when you see my child on the street, then you will know that she is not up to anything suspicious and needs to be automatically felt guilty for something. So that is what we want you to understand. I want Safir to speak as well on some action steps that can happen next.
Thank you very much, Maria. And I definitely agree and want to reemphasize all that you've said in that self-reflection is critical. It certainly is an important step to take. I think it's also important to address structural racism when you see it. It's important that you step in and say something, because too often we rely on the oppressed to be the voice of the oppressed against the strength of an oppressor, which in reality is not all that possible, and it certainly is not effective. It's going to require a collaborative effort on every side of the racial spectrum within this country to come together, to step in and say something and be the voice for those whose voices are either silenced or ignored. And so when you see peers or you see administrators or you see systems that are set up to adversely impact or completely block and prohibit progress in Black communities, please say something. Stop those who feel empowered to do wrong. Stop those who feel entitled to gain access to opportunity while shutting out everyone else. Open your mouth, say something, advocate for those who either cannot or have been compromised in their ability to advocate for themselves.
Hey, this is Sabre. I just had one more piece I wanted to mention. I know we're running up on a bit of the end of the time here. We talked about history, and I think a piece that often people either may forget or never knew was that some of the services that we talk about for special education services came out of civil rights legislation. And I mentioned that because the whole separate but equal piece, and that was in I wasn't born yet. I think it was 1954. Don't quote me. I wasn't a history major. But the fact that the laws of this country were made around the color of people's skin was the basis for special education, separate but not equal. So this battle is based on way more than even we as individuals have experienced with our families and our children. It really is our country, as we're seeing with the current civil unrest around, and that's a whole other talk show, but around what's happening now. It's embedded in our country. And until we address the history of how people treat each other because they look different than whoever they're used to seeing, we will still face these challenges. And I think that's important to remember. I think in each of our ways, we've mentioned some things that have happened. Jess even mentioned that she was triggered in terms of some of her own experiences with the things that we're talking about. And our ancestors on whose shoulders we stand, and their ancestors, and that's all folks, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American. Talk to your parents about what their experiences were. And if you have a grandpa or a mima or auntie or abuela, talk to them about some of the things they've experienced, and maybe you'll have a better understanding on how we got to where we are now. My mother was raised in Alabama, so she told me some stories that I would not have believed had I not known that my mother experienced them. So think of that as we bring it forward to 2020 and have this conversation on Zoom, on technology that didn't even exist, 10, 15 years ago.
Thank you, Sabra. And as we begin to wrap up, and before I let Lisa end us out, we just want you to understand how serious this is, because we are being killed for no reasons at all. And our children who have disabilities are at a greater risk. So please understand that where we're coming from when we're talking and sharing our experiences and sharing what you can do to be a good ally. Just know that we are out here just being killed, and we want that to stop and we want that to end. So understand that first as well.
Thanks for that. And then thanks everyone for participating. Can't thank you enough. It was really informative and very interesting. I just wanted to touch on some of the comments and hopefully some of the panelists. I hope you have time to go back and look at some of them. We had a lot more comments than questions, which is good. I'm happy for comments and questions. But I just wanted to share, given the current events and given that you've been asked several times by the panel to please listen. A lot of times, if you're like me, you thought you were listening. And for the past 10 years, I've been an IEP advocate, and for the past 14 years, I've been a parent to a disabled child. And because my child is marginalized, I wanted to help all children who are marginalized. And I thought I was helping, and I thought I was listening. And I just want to share with you one of the kind of awakenings that have happened when I say I thought I was listening. I used to work in a district that was that had a very large Black population. I want to say about half the student population. And I was in that district a lot because they're still notorious, unfortunately, for not having a great special ed department. And in that district, I've attended more IEP meetings and more manifestation hearings and everything else than I can even remember. So I thought I was helping, but now's the time that we need to stop and pause and listen and take that deeper dive, because what I wasn't doing was I wasn't doing anything to try to break down a system that requires a white advocate's attendance in order for a child to get a fair manifestation hearing. I was attending the manifestation hearings and thinking, okay, I'm not going to let them get this kid. I'm not going to let them expel this kid. But like I said, I wasn't doing anything to break down the system that made my participation there necessary in order for that child to be treated fairly. In fact, you can argue that I was making it worse because I was perpetuating a racist system, a system that continually grants more special ed services and less discipline and less harsher discipline to white families than it does to Black ones. I was using my whiteness. What?
I would say that it's not an either or, it's an and both.
Yes.
Right? Because in the situations that you talk about, maybe there was that one kid that you quote unquote saved. And I get that, right? Had you not been there, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But also, and I think there was a comment that I saw about, and I don't know who said it, but as a white person, they were like, oh, well, they would come to me and ask me questions and not go talk to the Black person or the Black parent. As a white person, you direct them right back to the person they need to be talking to.
Right.
Right. So you've played a part, and I wouldn't minimize your actions, but it takes more than one person to dismantle a racist structure.
Right. And I don't, yes, I agree with that. But I just want to speak to folks who think they might be helping and they think, well, I'm helping. But it's about taking that next step, that deeper dive. I helped a lot of kids secure services, let's say a social skills class, but not doing that deep dive and saying all social skills classes are based upon white culture. and not all Black children are going to respond to that. So, and and then the reason I'm saying this is again for reflection, but also some of the comments that I saw on the chat today were, as some of you were sharing your struggles, it was about, oh, well, visit your parent training center, or, oh, call your parent training center and call this and call that. It's taking that deep dive. It's taking that, or having the awareness that when someone who has a name that is recognizably, very likely a Black person, the parent training center doesn't return their call, or they make assumptions based on your last name that either you're uneducated or that you do not speak English, or. So it's not just that as a white family, I had a ton of resources shared with me, and it's not just about sharing the resources with Black families. It's realizing, well, what are those resources and what is the training of those folks at those agencies, and what information are they then giving out to those families? So it's hard. It's, you know, and this group has held me accountable on a few things I've said and done, and I appreciate it. And they've said, we have to have these difficult conversations. And there's a lot of times when I say, okay, I need to take a deep breath and realize that this has to change. But I know that the audience that we're speaking to, that you all have children who are marginalized, and you know what that feels like, just by virtue of being disability. So imagine if, you know, you had these additional challenges on top of that. And that not only is your child marginalized, but both the parents are as well. So, okay. That's all I have to say. Next week is we're going to talk about IEP meetings and retaliation and how parents are treated in IEP meetings. So I do hope that you will join us then. Again, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And other than that, enjoy your evening.
Thank you for listening, and goodbye.